Hey everyone, this is Josh from Solopreneur Grind for episode 86 of the Solopreneur Grind podcast. I'm happy to be joined by Ellen Goodwin, productivity coach and consultant. Ellen, thanks very much for coming on the show today.
Super excited to be here, Josh.
I'm going to quickly date this. It is December the 6th, 2020. I don't always date episodes, but the reason why I think this one is super important is because we're all in the mix of varying degrees of lockdown and COVID and et cetera, could not be a more fitting time to talk about productivity. But Ellen, before we dive right in, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, please?
Absolutely. I'm a productivity consultant, trainer, coach. I'm an author of a book about productivity, which I'm sure we'll touch on later. I'm a TEDx speaker and speak for other people or to other groups. Run a podcast, and I just help people get their things done. I'm not going to say what I usually say because I don't know how clean you like to keep it.
We're not overly picky here, and I'm super excited to get into that stuff. But Ellen, can you talk to us about where your career started? Were you always in this line of business, or even going back as far as, or I don't know how far, but finishing school and kind of starting your career? What did that look like for you?
It was a big old mess. I went to college with the whole idea of becoming a lawyer. And so I did all the law stuff. I had internships all over the place. My final internship, my senior year, I worked for the Public Defender's Office of Washington, D.C., which was really cool. And it convinced me that there was no way in hell I was going to be a lawyer because I could not have been more bored. And so all of a sudden it's the end of my senior year, and all the things I thought I was going to do next. I'd taken my law school exams. All of a sudden the stuff I thought I was going to do didn't happen. And I graduated. I moved to Washington, D.C. because I knew people there. I grew up in a small town in central Minnesota, and I was not staying in Minnesota. So I moved to Washington, D.C. I spent 3 years doing randomly interesting things. I ran a toy store, a little boutique toy store. I worked for AARP. I did things. And after about 3 years, I decided I needed to be doing something else. So I moved to California, Southern California, to go to art school, advertising art school, become a graphic designer. Thought I'd stay here for a year. Ended up meeting my future ex-husband. And so it's like 33 years later, I'm still here. From being a graphic designer, I got into advertising, worked for various advertising agencies. After a few years, things were contracting, writing on the wall. So I left and became my own boss and ran my own business for 20 something years, doing creative advertising, graphic design. But along the way, there was this point in time where I almost lost the business because I fell into what I like to call the pit of procrastination. And everything was way more interesting than what I was supposed to be doing. And so I'd miss a couple deadlines, and clients love that. They just love it when you miss deadlines. And I'm being so facetious there. And I didn't learn from that. And I kept losing deadlines, putting them off, doing other things. And I lost clients, I lost business, and almost lost the whole business. And that's when I sat down with myself and said, you're a smart woman. What the hell are you doing? And that's basically the turning point when I started doing a lot of research, taking classes, talking with people, courses, learning what was going on when I procrastinate and couldn't focus and couldn't build good habits. And from all of that information, I started putting together systems and tools I used to bring me back up out of that pit where the business was almost gone. And my business took off. I was doing great. But people noticed and they started asking me, what are you doing? How are you doing that? And so that's when I started training people. And that became a lot more interesting to me and a lot more fun. And so I sort of just slowly segued out of graphic design, began teaching, training, writing my book, all of those things. And here we are today in COVID. As we talked about, we're starting tonight, lockdown in Southern California for 3 weeks. So
Right.
there I am, wrap it all up.
Right. It'll be more important than ever to stick to your own practices. Ellen, I want to, before getting more into the business side, what was it like navigating those first few years when we'll call it, I guess, your future career was so uncertain, right? Because I think your story is definitely an interesting one, and you're bouncing around all over the place, and that's probably more common than we think for a lot of people. What do you recommend for those that are earlier on in their career? Maybe they're uncertain about things. Maybe they just finished a program that now they're not so excited to pursue in the real world, we'll call it, when you actually get a job. I'm actually a Canadian lawyer myself, so I can relate to the big difference between what goes on in law school and then what happens when you walk through the doors of a law firm. But I'm interested to hear advice on, for those who are at the beginning of their career, maybe they're not so certain. Do you have maybe some advice on how they could navigate that, or the key takeaways from when you navigated it?
From the one when I decided I wasn't going to be a lawyer? Is that,
Well,
or just
really,
moving
it
from,
sounds like really those first few years, right? Because then you jumped around from different gigs, then you moved to California, then you decided to go back to
Mhm.
school. How what would you recommend for people to kind of make navigating a lot of that uncertainty, which I think is quite normal at the beginning of many people's careers? How can people navigate that a little bit better?
Well, I think one of the key things I learned from that, and I use it all the time now, I mean, just it applies to my business now, always, is experimentation. Just knowing, especially when you get out of college, when you're just trying to figure it out, you can experiment. I mean, nothing you're going to do is going to possibly scar you for life. Granted, I mean, there's a few things, but for the most part, experiment and realize that you can tell yourself, I'm going to do this for a year, and at the end of the year, I'll talk to myself about, is it working? What could I be doing different? And staying open to what's going to show up. I know
Hmm.
when I had moved to DC and I worked for I can't even remember what they called themselves, but it dealt with timeshares, and it was a weird place. And I left there, and out of the blue, one of the women that I worked with, her boyfriend, he was had this toy store, and do you want to manage it? And I'm like, I can play with toys all the time, but just being open to what was happening and what could happen, and believing that there's going to be a path, especially at the beginning, because it's just like there is so much. And I think when you're unsure, just being open
Hmm.
and seeing, okay, this is nothing I'm going to do is going to end my career. It's going to
Right.
open up things, and just I do believe you have to believe. And I know that sounds a little Pollyanna-ish,
Hmm.
but for the most part, just experiment.
Yeah. And I find the same thing in business, right? If you're unsure about what to do, maybe you're putting things off, put it out there, test it, give it a try.
Hmm.
Usually things, maybe good things don't happen the next day, but over time you tend to be able to figure it out. And so what do you think it was that ultimately drew you towards the advertising space?
Well, I was doing the graphic design and the advertising. Just I loved. Uh, this is going to date me, but
I usually get to that. It's sneakily, I usually get that out of people somehow.
how old are you really? Um, Back when I had gotten into graphic design and advertising, advertising was going through this enormous change. In Minnesota, and for the life of me, because you said it, and I cannot think of the ad agency, but they changed advertising in such a way that advertising never really went back, and it was a lot of print that they did, and I was just in love with what they were doing, and just in love with the idea of advertising. Let me share with you, let not sell to you, but let the graphics of it, the beauty of it. I mean, I would sit and go through advertising yes, there's books, of like really good, and I would just
I got a few
love
down
that.
down
Yeah.
near the bottom specifically. I think Ogilvy on advertising is the last one that I
Ogilvy's
read. But
such
yeah,
that's such a good book. But yeah, I mean, I used to get Ad Age every Monday. I'd pick up Ad Age, and it was porn. I will I will own up that it was just visual porn for me, and I loved it.
awesome. And so, what ultimately led you to opening your own business? Because that's obviously a big decision. Up until that point, it sounds like it
Huge.
was mostly employment, but you had some management, maybe some leadership
Yeah,
opportunities. So, how did
yeah.
that come about?
Well, there was a recession. And with the recession came a lot of scaling back. The company I was working for at the time, we had a couple big accounts that weren't going anywhere. One was the electric company. Okay, the gas and electric, they're not going anywhere. We had a hospital, but other accounts were smaller, and people were scaling back, and there was the writing on the wall. I'd always wanted to be a freelancer, to run my own business, just to be in charge of my future. And so when I saw things were going to come down, I looked at what I had for money. I looked at potential clients that I could take with me, or other clients that they could introduce me to. And I just made a decision, put a line in the sand. It was like it was the week of Halloween.
Hmm.
And I was like, I'm done. I'm done. And my then husband and I had a week planned in Hawaii, because why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you quit your job and then go to Hawaii for a week? Um, and while I was in Hawaii, there was this huge cutback, and all these people got laid off. And so I was like, I was ahead of the curve. I was
Yeah.
super happy about that. But I do have to say, I'd saved up money. I was ready to do this, and I had this whole book of clients that I was okay, these are people I'm going to deal with. And for the first 3 months, I had no work. None whatsoever. And I was getting a little panicky. I still remember the day my husband came in, and he's like, "Are you ever going to have work?" And I was like, "Yes, I will." But I was so stunned by that. And then years later, he apologized for saying that. But it did take 3 months before people came in, because all the people that I thought were going to come to me, no, they didn't. So it was 3 months of, well, here I am arranging pencils. So,
Yeah,
uh,
it can really be a humbling experience. I mean, to be honest, 3 months from my experiences and from interviewing, over 80 other solopreneurs, 3 months isn't actually all that bad if you look at the average. And there's nothing more humbling than hanging out your sign and realizing that it takes more than hanging out your sign to get real
exactly.
business coming in. But so, what do you think it was, Ellen, that ultimately led to getting the ball rolling? Like, what did the like 3 to 12 month mark look like?
Much better, actually.
Well, there's only one way to go, right?
There's really, well, yeah, I just was not going back to working in someone's office. And so it looked much better. But, it was revisiting people that I had sent letters to. Uh, it was also a different time. It wasn't like we were like firing up the internet all the time, and like said, I was writing letters, calling people. And so it was finally, okay, hey, we've got this little job, or can you come in and work in the office for a few days because somebody's out. And it was getting those first initial people to pull me in, and then word of mouth got going.
Right.
But 3 months at that point, because freelancing and things like that weren't as common. Working from home wasn't as common. And so it was, I didn't have a lot of people I could go, and I didn't want to tell people either, like, hey, by the way, nothing's happening. So it's good to know that, it does take longer. But at the time it was, oh my God.
Yeah.
I'm never going to work again.
So what do you recommend? Because if you could save some people from, and even if it's just reiterating to be aware that you are going to go through this terrible time, if you do end up starting your own business. But for those that are listening that are thinking about pulling the trigger, or maybe they're in that first or second month, what are two or three things you would recommend to them to make it easier, or to, maybe there were a couple things that actually you noticed led to those first few clients that you would recommend that they do?
Not giving up on the people don't that you've reached out to.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, hey, I've started my business, and crickets. Well, a couple months later, reach out and go, hey, still doing my own business. What's happening with you? I mean, that's still something I'm doing now. I mean, I have stacks of business cards and contacts, and I am reaching out to people and just saying, hey, how are you doing, especially now? How are
Mm-hmm.
you doing with COVID? Da da da. Always, is there any way I can help you? And it's not a sales call and anything. It's just a touching. It's a warm call to say, hey. And a lot of times people will then ask, well, what are you doing? And
Mm-hmm.
especially in the case of starting a business, well, I'm doing this. And, if pressed, you can always say, I'd love for you to refer me. You're not asking them for work. You're like, if something comes up and you talking to somebody, and let's say they need a graphic designer. Hey, could you mention my name?
Mm-hmm.
But without being salesy, but just doing that one-on-one communication, because ultimately that's how we work together, is
Yeah,
just not being afraid.
it's such a great point. It could even be as little as maybe when you reached out to them last month, they didn't open that email, or they were so bogged down that week they actually needed it but forgot. And so the approach that I've kind of taken in that regard is you never know, right? But like you said, do it properly, be respectful, be friendly, add value. I think that's great advice. So, Ellen, let's talk about that business a little bit more. And the reason I'm interested is because we like to help solopreneurs build, big successful businesses for themselves. And it sounds like you built a really big and successful business in that first shot, right? That you took. There may have been like different iterations of it, or maybe it took you, I don't know how long. But what do you think ultimately led to the success of that graphic design / advertising business? Maybe if you can summarize it in a few kind of keys to success that others would be able to replicate themselves.
Professionalism, I think, is the main point. And I think a lot of that came from actually, working in someone else's business and keying in on what you learned. One of the things
Hmm.
I always got from printers, I'd be sending my files in. It was always like, we love to get your files because we know they're perfect. And
Hmm.
when they say perfect, that there was just all of the attention to the minor little things that you would need to know. And I'm not going to go in because it's, publishing jargon,
Hmm.
but the things that you needed to know. And if I didn't know them, I would make a point of learning them and making sure that I followed through with them, because all I always wanted to be, here is the perfect package. It's put it, you're not going to have to come back to me.
Right.
I wanted it to be easy to work with me. And that would have been the key thing, that people wouldn't be like, oh crap, her
Hmm.
files. There's going to
Right.
be fonts missing. There's going to be, no, it's just, she knew what she was doing. It was professionally done. And I think that was important, because then printers would refer me. Other people that hired me would know that they were taken care of, that there wasn't any hand holding. It's that feeling where, if you're having a leak in your sink and you call a plumber, and the plumber comes and he's like, I've got this, boom boom boom, he takes care of it. That feeling of, okay, someone's taking care
Hmm.
of me, not like the plumber that shows up and goes, there's
Hmm.
no
Yeah.
sense of authority. And I think that is part of it, is just being in charge, being professional, knowing exactly your business, and taking,
Definitely.
so people trust you.
Right.
And so, yeah, I got referred because of that. So it became word of mouth.
Right. It kind of sounds, Ellen, like you'd actually make a pretty good lawyer based off of some of those the advantages that you're listing off here. But we won't go there right now.
That ship
So
has sailed.
yeah, oh, I could only imagine. So Ellen, that's great. So this business gets off the ground, things are going really well, and then take us through what led to the, I don't know what to call it, the unproductive phase. What was it? Stuff in personal life was mixing over, but when things are going so well, you're building a great business. What happened to distract you? I don't know.
Yeah,
I'm
well,
interested to hear though that phase.
yeah, we went through another recession. So there was a contraction of the clients, of the things that I was getting. So a lot of the stuff I was not getting the big things that I enjoyed doing. So I was focusing on smaller things that, yeah, for lack of a better word, did not spark joy. And without that joy, it was easy to just, do other things, get distracted, give into procrastination. In retrospect, if I had looked at my bank balance like every morning, I think that would have lit a better fire under me. But it was
Yeah.
just, I wasn't excited. I wasn't excited about what was going on. And that made it really easy to do the whole shiny squirrel thing of like, oh, that's way more interesting than this flyer I'm doing for a credit union. Like,
Yeah.
what's there?
Yeah, and I'm sure we'll get a little bit more into it, but I actually think that that's kind of what you can boil productivity or lack of productivity down to, right? Is it, am I interested enough in what I'm supposed to be doing, or are the other options looking that much better than what I could be doing? But let's get into a little bit more about that topic. I mean, it's your specialty. It sounds like it's your life these days, which is it's a good time to have that as your life because of the way the whole world's working from home pretty much right now. A lot of it is,
Right.
at least. So you said you did a lot of learning. You were basically implementing what you were learning yourself. People were taking a notice. Can you talk about what the shift was like? Actually, like, did you shut down that other business? Did you sell it? And how did you end up making that whole shift? Because that is a big shift, right? Moving
It's a
from one business to an entirely different one.
Yeah, and it was not a clean pivot. It wasn't like you said, it wasn't like I shut down on Friday and Monday I like, hey, here I am. Uh, it was a slow pivot where I like you said, I started using these tools and systems, and people began to notice, and I began helping people, writing about it, kind of shifting my identity. But for a lot of my graphic design advertising clients, I didn't let them know right away, just because, again, money was always an issue. I wanted, strangely, to keep eating on a regular basis. And so
Usually important, yeah.
somewhat. So I did like a gradual pivot where I built up the new business little by little. People learned about it. And as the clients might have, attrition out, their projects done, and I didn't actively seek new business. So
Right.
I just, ramped up the new one, kind of let the old one peter out. There was a point where I finally had to just tell a client, you know what, I'm not doing that anymore. And here's somebody that can do it for you. So it was very much a slow pivot.
Right. And so how did you approach starting that new business? Because the first one was pretty clear service, right? Hey, I do graphic design work. These are probably the
Yeah.
targets. Here's how I'll advertise to them, and they'll say yes or no. How different was it now moving to a productivity coach? Did you even know that was kind of what it was that you were going to sell, right? Maybe you were making courses or ebooks, or how did you approach that type of business?
Well, again, there was the experimentation. There was a few things that I thought about. Here's the stuff I can teach you about doing things, and I looked at different groups of people. And originally, my whole thing was I was going to work with women going through divorces and dealing with, trying to focus and doing all that stuff because I had gone through one. And then I decided, I don't want to relive that because again, no joy.
Yeah.
Um, so it's such an interesting question.
Okay.
Yeah, much the same as I talked about earlier, experimentation
Hmm.
and looking at, okay, do I want to deal with this group? What would I share with people? What are people needing help with? And yeah, it's a very broad, hey, productivity. Everybody has different issues with what they can get done. I know one day I was talking with a friend and I was talking about when people have downtime or they, have this time, free time where they're not using it like they should. And she's a teacher and she's like, there is no downtime in my, and I'm like, note to self,
Hmm.
okay, teachers, not my group. So it was very much an experimenting and finding out who needed what and what appealed to me. So I've done like consulting with randomly attorneys offices because they were not, especially smaller ones, they were not, everybody wasn't pulling their weight or not doing what they needed, and came in and worked with their offices. And I'm like, okay, this works. And there was other things that I did where it's like, no, people don't want that. Or I would run workshops, and to me this is like, oh my god, I would go to a workshop like this, and if in an hour I could learn all of this. And no, people didn't care about that.
Hmm.
So it was very much experimentation. Did I have a business plan? Yeah, I had, it wasn't super detailed, but it was like, this is what I'm going to do. And 6 months in, it was very much, hey, let me look. That didn't work. I mean, it was more of a business guess.
Hmm.
It was a plan of what I thought would work and then experimenting and finding out. So it was going with the flow.
I mean, that's kind of what business is, right? We can make plans, we can make projections, ultimately, until you test and pivot and learn what the market actually wants and how they want it. We're all just traveling with the lights off, right? And trying to find our way. So it's good to hear, Ellen. So let's talk more about productivity. There's probably a lot that we can touch on. The first question that I have is, what were some of the most unproductive things you found yourself doing when you first got into that, we'll just call it unproductive phase while you were still running your graphic design business? What were some of the most common unproductive kind of patterns you were recognizing, and or what are common ones that most people struggle with today?
Well, we talked about getting distracted because things aren't interesting. I mean, your brain, your limbic system loves the new and novel,
Hmm.
and it is most easily attracted to the new and novel when it's not enjoying what you're doing. So it was, like I talked about before, super easy to get distracted. I would play games. And
Hmm.
hey, there's a game on my computer. Let me just jump over there. Or the whole deep dive into something that has no meaning whatsoever to your life. Yeah, the
Hmm.
internet is fantastic for that. So there was a lot of just wasting time. Just wasting time. Okay, some of the other things, besides the internet, it could, it was everything else, like I say, phone calls, or I could just get off track doing, hey, laundry needs to be done,
Hmm.
or this needs to be done. And I know that this is not rare, especially a lot of people are now encountering this, and we'll probably get into that working from home. Just everything becomes exciting if it's not, if it's something other than what you're supposed to be doing that you're not excited by.
Right.
And
Well, and
I fell into that.
I think you're probably right, Ellen, that it's kind of normal, right? And it can happen with everyday things. And then you pile on top of that the fact that we are now, I mean, we're carrying around these distraction machines. We're talking on
Oh,
distraction machines like the internet and phones. I mean, it's almost unfair, right? Like how do you expect, especially the younger generations, or people who are, maybe haven't had long careers, and all of a sudden, there's choice A, boring work, and there's choice B, anything I want to do that could be fun on the internet. Games, I mean, you hear about companies like Facebook and stuff like that, where they basically have departments dedicated to figuring out how to keep you on their apps longer. So, how do you, even considering that as well? I mean, where should people even begin to approach productivity, given it's 2020, we're working from home, and all this tech app stuff is just pulling us the other way as well?
Well, I think, and I teach this and talk to people about it, is you have to be smarter. You have
Mm-hmm.
to be smarter than that. And it doesn't mean you have to be brilliant and like, oh yeah, this isn't going to be happening. You just have to be one step ahead of yourself. Your future
Mm-hmm.
self really has to take care of yourself now. So that means, for instance, on my computer, I have blockers. I'm on a Mac, so I use self control, which I can set up that it's going to block me it can block me up to 24 hours. I
Hmm.
can say, at the end of the day, I can put it on. I have picked the apps and things that are the biggest time wasters for me, and I can set it up. So let's say I shut down work at 6 o'clock. I can't get back on these websites and things until maybe 3 the next afternoon.
Hmm.
I have to have the willpower to set those up.
Mm-hmm.
But if I can block myself, I've saved myself from going down that rabbit hole. There's all sorts of different blockers you can get that will block you across all of your devices, which is key because if I block my computer, yeah, I still have a phone, I still have an
Right.
iPad, I go like,
Yeah.
oh. But if I can block all of that, uh, that helps. The blockers just
Mm-hmm.
being stronger than yourself. It's like being able to turn off your phone and put it in a drawer for 2 hours so you don't see it. It's just being smarter than yourself. And I'd say if you know that you're still going to get distracted, fine, get distracted, but make the performance of that distraction, like you said, let's say getting on Facebook or Instagram or something that's, oh, the whole idea is they're going to hold your attention. Fine, do it. But while you're doing it, you have to make it awkward. So
Hmm.
that might mean you have to walk around your house while you're on Instagram, or you have to go stand outside when it's cold or it's hot.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, you play video games, but you've got to have gloves on or a motorcycle helmet.
Hmm.
Make it uncomfortable because as soon as you get comfortable, I mentioned the limbic system before. The fallback there for your brain is to be comfortable. It wants the comfort zone. That's why it's called the comfort zone. It wants to be comfortable. So if you're
Hmm.
slouched on the couch, playing a video game, looking at your phone, there is nothing that is appealing to your brain about getting up and going to work
Mm-hmm.
because you're in that whole body is your body's relaxed. You're enjoying something that you're getting little hits of dopamine. There's nothing that is going to get you up off that couch. But if you're walking around, you're doing whatever on your phone, I'm looking at Facebook. There comes a point where, you know what, this isn't really fun.
Right.
I'm getting little hits of dopamine, but my body is active. I'm not relaxed. And
Yeah.
that helps to short circuit it. So you make those distractions awkward to do.
That's a really good way of putting it. I never really thought of it as physical, right? I always thought of productivity as a mental thing. I have to be focused. I take a break, blah, blah, blah. I never thought about kind of bringing in the physical element, which is a really good idea. The other thing that's really worked for me is scheduling it, right? Like, you show me someone who isn't unproductive at all, and you show me like God himself, right? But if I can schedule little 5 minute, 10 minute slots,
Mm-hmm.
lunch breaks where I'm just look at Reddit as much as you want, right? Watch that Twitch
Exactly.
stream, et cetera, et cetera. It helps. It helps as well. Do you have any other, maybe like two or three other tips or tricks, Ellen? Like practical, what could I do tomorrow that will make me be more productive? It could be stuff that you just said, walking around, maybe
Yeah.
planning, scheduling, anything related to that?
Oh, I've got all of them. Well, I mean, and just like you said, like lunch. Okay, it's lunch. I'm going to look at Reddit. I have done it before where I set on my phone, which uh, always touching your phone is a moment of choice, whether you give in to distractions or doing your regular thing. But I will set up alarms that will go off at 5 minutes to the top of the hour. So I know that I work for 55 minutes and then I have 5 minutes to do whatever I want. And then alarm goes off.
Hmm.
So it is scheduling because, again, then your brain knows that you're going to get that time. And so it doesn't
Right.
go looking for things to do. Um, timing, timing is a huge thing. I don't know. I use one of those timers that you can just roll over and it times
Oh,
for you.
interesting.
So
Wow.
if
I didn't know
this
that
is a
existed.
30, 20, they're awesome
Wow. So
because
for those
this,
who are just listening, Ellen's
oh,
holding up, it almost looks like a cube with a clock on one side and then numbers on each,
numbers
different
on the
numbers.
other. Yeah. And then, like, if I went with a 30-minute, as when I switch it over the timer, I tip it down and it just starts doing 30
Oh,
minutes.
wow. Very cool.
And I will tell you who makes this real quick. Uh, she said, trying to say, uh, MOAS, MOOAS.
Okay, I'll have to take a look. No
And
affiliation, I'm assuming.
they come on, yes, they come with different timing things. Um, or just, kitchen timers. This is like my
Hmm.
favorite kitchen timer. Because kitchen timers, if you just set a timer and work during that period of time, and maybe it's 15 minutes, maybe it's 12. There's no magic. Like, I know people know about pomodoros. Oh, 25 minutes and then you take a 5. Yeah, there's nothing magic there.
Hmm.
If you've got 23 minutes, set a timer and use it, because when you have you have this amount of time, you're going to use it. You're not going to waste it.
Hmm.
But when you start to do that, always know what you want to get done. That's why I'm a big
Right.
post-it note person. Okay, I'm going to have 30 minutes between this call and this call. These are the 3 things I'm going to get done. And I put it on a post-it note. And usually I want to have more things on there than I probably will do, because if I get those first 3 things done and I still got time left, rather than sitting there and going, well, I could do this, I could do that, where you just waste
Right.
time, you've already got the next thing.
Hmm.
Um, One that I love to do, and I have on my desk, I always have a pair of dice,
Hmm.
a pair of just regular dice. And what works well is if you look at your list, a lot of times there's things that have the same priority. I need to do this, I need to do that. And you can waste so much time and get so distracted by deciding,
Hmm.
okay, I want, no, 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 just number them. Just
Hmm.
number those things, roll the dice, whatever number comes up, that's the thing you do. Get it
Right.
done, cross it off, roll the dice again. So
Right.
you eliminating choices, because choices are wonderful moments of choice where you can decide whether to get distracted or not. And when you waste time using up energy that you
Hmm.
could be doing something else, and making choices, great way to procrastinate. So
Absolutely. Yeah, no, it makes so much sense, especially the last piece. I mean, I'm a to-do list guy, like, and it's on my desk at all times. Like, this is my to-do
right.
list. I never actually thought about the benefit of having more things on that list than you can get done, because at the very least, you get what you need done. At the very most, you might get even more fit in that day. What I've ended up doing, and then maybe this can help some people, is sometimes I'll mark down the 4 or 5 items that I know I need to get done that day, and I don't know what order per se to do them in. That is a great idea with the dice. What I have been doing up until now is I just put numbers in order. Because what I do at
Yeah.
the beginning of the day is I put a star next to what I need to get done today. Then I go through the stars and I typically order them in order of importance. Sometimes it's not clear. And so instead of wasting time trying to think more about what the order is, I just go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then I just start doing them, because at the
Uh-huh.
very least I'll get them done faster. I like the dice idea. The last thing I quickly want to add with the Pomodoro technique, which I totally agree, is I actually like the Pomodoro technique, but like you said, the number is random and might not be optimal, because if you have deep work to get done, there's too many studies now saying that, you don't actually get into flow until like the 20-30 minute mark. So if you have to do deep thinking, you might need the 55 on, 10 off, or whatever the heck the numbers are. So I really like that stuff. Ellen, what about if someone is stuck with maybe they have one or two big tasks that they need to get done, but they are those unenjoyable tasks, right? We've kind of alluded to it a little bit throughout this episode, where what you have sitting between you and being done is just not fun, right? Whatever it is, that's going to be different depending on the person. Is there anything different that that person might want to do, or how can someone approach that so that they get it done as soon as possible? Because for me, it feels like it's those tasks that I put off the longest, that I tend to procrastinate on the most, until I just finally suck it up and do it. Maybe I put on some more like higher energy music in the background, or I don't even know what. Do you have any advice on how to get over those?
Yeah, absolutely. Because I was just waiting for you to say the phrase I always hear from people. They're like, yeah, I put them off, and then I did it, and it took like 3 minutes. Yeah. But what I would do is I'm going to go back to timers, because in these situations, because a lot of times we do blow them up. Oh my God, it's going to take forever. And it does take 5 minutes. So I'm a big believer in just set a timer for 5 minutes. And, that can be as easy as just, if you have a one of those things in your house where you say her name and she sets the timer for you. But just set a timer for 5 minutes and get going. And you can, one of two things is going to happen. First, it's going to be super easy. You're going to play beat the clock and try and get it done within the 5 minutes. Or if it's a longer thing, the Zeigarnik effect is going to jump in. And that's a cognitive bias that once you've started something, your brain wants you to finish it. It doesn't like open loops. That's why commercials that start and they have like a little vignette and then the middle, and you will stay on that commercial to see that all wrapped up. And same with books, movies, things like that. So you want to create that in your brain, that you get started, and once you've done it for 5 minutes and there's still more to do, you want to keep going. So you set the timer. 5 minutes. It's sort of the magic number to get going. Or play beat the clock with yourself. And I especially for short things, I've done that where, I need to put a new battery in the smoke detector and sew on a button and take 3 boxes out to the garage. And those things, they don't get done. But if I set a timer for 10 minutes, boom, I'm playing beat the clock. It's a game. My game, your brain loves games. You don't want to get distracted. I'm going to sew the button on, and then no, I got to beat the clock. So, it's it's a sprint to get your things done, but playing games with your brain is one of the best things you can do, because really inside your brain, it's like a 3-year-old, and 3-year-olds love games. Play games.
Absolutely. That's great advice. Ellen, one of the last things I want to ask you about is, most of us are working from home. Most of us are working from home for the first time ever. And most of us might be working from home for quite some time. I mean, it'll be interesting to see how different industries adjust. And, some tech companies are saying, permanent work from home, some aren't, et cetera, et cetera. But either way, how can people be more productive at home? And or what do you think are some rules that people should put in place when working from home to improve their productivity?
Well, you touched on it earlier. Having a schedule is definitely one of the things you do want. And it doesn't have to be this rigid, like 9 to 9:05, I do this, and then I do that. But an idea of what you want to get done, and an idea of how that looks for you. Because you're so used to having coworkers and bosses and things. You've had this accountability that people are there, and all of a sudden without that accountability, it's really easy to watch Netflix all morning and then go, I need to get that done. So having some sort of schedule or plan for outcomes, and that's That's as easy as you could take a Post-it note and write down the 5 things that you have to accomplish that day. This is not a to-do list, because you're not going to put, this is what has to be done and this is what I'm going to do. But you have this outline of your day, 5 things that have to be accomplished, and then it's up to you to fill in the blanks, to do what you have to do during the day to make that happen. So having a schedule. I'm not a huge believer or proponent of like you have to get dressed like you're going to work, but I would say get in some sort of clothes that indicate to you that you're working. I love yoga pants just like anyone, but in my mind, those are comfy pants, and comfy pants are after work when I'm not working. So find something that does bring to mind that, yeah, this is the working time. And if you have to, especially like for focus time, adopt something that tells you this is focus time. I have writers I work with, and they have baseball caps that they put on when it's writing time. And when that cap is on, that's when they're writing. And when the cap comes off, then they're not. It could be John Waters, the he's an author, movie producer, all the crazy stuff that he's done. He has a brown sweater that he puts on when it's time to be creative. And then he knows that's the time that he's working on television scripts or books or whatever. But he's got the brown sweater he puts on.
Right.
So
hope he washes it regularly.
Yes. And have a space. Having a space where you know that this is where I work. And I know that's difficult for some people from work from home, because wow, they never expected the dining room table to be their office. So having spaces that you can use, that this is my workspace, this is my relaxing space. And if you can't do that, then do that do the clothing thing, or even maybe it's a piece of jewelry, but something that puts your mind in the place of this is work time, because that otherwise it just becomes all amorphous, and you've got to segment it out.
Absolutely. Totally agree with all that stuff. Really good advice, Ellen. Thanks again very much for coming on, sharing your story, sharing this advice, which, as I said, I think this is probably more important for most people than ever before. If people are interested in learning more about you, getting more of your content, maybe even getting in touch, where do you recommend that they go?
Okay. I'm at my website is ellengoodwin.com. My book is called Done, How to Work When No One's Watching. So it's very much the work from home, and that's available on Amazon. I'm on Ellen Goodwin, pretty much most of the socials. Instagram, it's Done the Book. And in January, just because people are having issues with focus and procrastination, and it's going to be a whole new year, and we're going to be really excited, I'll be running a 21-day accountability challenge, and that will all be coming out December 16th. So if you join me on Facebook, Instagram, join the website, you can get all the information when it comes out.
Awesome. We will have all of those links in the description, whether you're watching on YouTube, listening on your favorite platform. This episode will be going live a couple days before then, in the middle of December. So timing will be perfect. Ellen, thank you again for coming on the show. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Josh, for having me. This has been really fun.